The night was dark, a thick fog blanketing the road as David Morris drove home from work. Suddenly, he saw a reddish glow from a nearby field. Upon approaching, he saw a tall, strange object hovering several feet above the ground. Good evening to all of my fellow tinfoil hats. I am just another tinfoil hat. Welcome to my show. Today, we will be discussing the fascinating case of the Monroe Falls roadside humanoids. March 28th, 1967, around 2:15, 2:30 in the morning, a 20-year-old man by the name of David Morris was driving from his job at the Lamb Electric Company in Kent, Ohio, to his home in Monroe Falls, Ohio. Now, apparently, there had been a storm in the area earlier in the day, so he was driving carefully and slowly as the whole area was blanketed in this thick fog or mist. Now, suddenly, as he approached a kind of hill in the road, he noticed an orangish reddish glow on the left side of the road, and the source of which was again obscured out of sight because of this hill. He slowed down even more, thinking that perhaps it was a house fire that had been caused by a lightning strike. As he finally drove up the hill, however, he saw the source. It was no house fire. Instead, what he saw was a, quote, wedge or cone shaped object, which was glowing about 30 yards to the left of the road, planted in or perhaps over a wheat field. He claimed that this object, again, was about 25 feet tall with a 12-foot diameter base, and it kind of had this, like, it was a cone shaped object, and then it had this sphere on the top of it. So effectively, what you have is a 25-foot tall glowing party hat. Now, he also claimed that he felt as though the cone was hovering closely over the ground, and that it looked as though it was translucent and internally luminous. Now, David said that he wasn't really frightened by this object, just kind of intrigued at this giant glowing cone thing. However, he was thoroughly spooked by what happened next. As David looked away from the object and, got his eyes back on the road, he saw that about 50 feet in front of him were 4 or 5 small humanoid beings just kind of standing in the middle of the road. Well, actually, that's a lie. They were not just standing in the middle of the road. Actually, they were running very quickly back and forth across the middle of the road. David said that they appeared to be about 3.5 to 4 feet tall. He said that he couldn't tell if there were about 4 or 5 of them, that they had huge bulbous heads, and he got the feeling that they were completely clothed in seamless suits, almost like wetsuits. Oddly enough, he also said that they were giving off the same quality of reddish orange glow that the object in the field was. Now, again, these things were running just extremely quickly across the road. Morris claimed that they moved purposefully from a drainage ditch on one side of the road back to the other and back again, just kind of over and over. As soon as he saw these things, he slammed on the brakes. He estimated that he was going about 30 miles per hour, but again, it had been storming, there was fog, who knows what the road conditions were like, and the things just gave no indication of noticing his presence. So as he attempted to brake his car, he didn't quite get it in time, and as he approached where the creatures were, he heard a thump as his car struck one of the creatures crossing the road. His car rolled another 10 feet before it finally stopped. Now, instinctively, David said that he began to open his door when he stopped. He had noticed when his car had hit the creature that its hand had sort of been thrown up near the window, and it had no fingers. Morris was suddenly struck with blind terror, thinking, quote, if I killed them, they'll kill me, and sped away from the scene. As he did so, he looked in the rearview mirror and saw that all of the figures were kind of standing together in a clump in the middle of the road. However, he couldn't see or at least tell if there was any figure that was lying in the middle of the road. Now, the next afternoon, he and a friend went back to see if they could find anything in the area where the event had happened. Now, they found no evidence of the cone-shaped object, no footprints, but they did find the skid marks where David had slammed on the brakes and struck the entity. Morris's car also had dents in 3 places as well as scratches in the chrome. Now, David Morris was not the only one to have sightings of strange things in the area. It seems as though in the early months of 1967, Ohio was simply abuzz with sightings of UFOs, including one long-running case of a Warren, Ohio family who was in communication with the infamous Wright-Patterson Air Base regarding kind of ongoing sightings of strange things in the sky. I'm actually going to see if I can dig up any more on that case because it sounds very neat and kind of includes a UFO sort of buzzing a cemetery, which is also, neat. So this is a trippy little case of short-lived yet high contact, very high contact. One of the most interesting parts to me is that yet again we have this case that we could say seems a little bit nonsensical. I mean, you have these tiny beings running back and forth across a road, a giant light up party hat like object over a wheat field, that leaves trace evidence, specifically trace evidence of David's car having been dented in 3 places and skid marks on the road showing that he did try to avoid hitting something. A notion that comes up time and time again regarding sightings of beings and an object, or to use the ufological belief system, a craft, is that many times both apparently separate aspects appear to be of the same material or same effect. Now, here we see that both the object and the beings were glowing this kind of reddish orange color. In his book Earthlights, Paul Devereaux propounds the concept of proto-entities, that any aspect of an encounter is made of the same effectively kind of psychologically malleable energy or substance, which takes form through the thoughts of the observer. While I appreciate aspects of this theory, historical cases show that there is kind of some individuated patterning to the phenomenon itself of its own accord. A case from the classic The Fairy Faith in Celtic Countries by W.Y. Evans Wentz seems appropriate to bring up here. As a matter of fact, in my opinion, David Morris's encounter reads almost like a modern day version of this sighting from well over a century ago. 2 men were on their way to a party at Cronkovati on the Isle of Man, when, upon looking across a small brook, they saw a circle of light on a flat area surrounded by hills. Inside this circle of light were small beings dressed in red, moving back and forth like, to quote, troops drilling. The reported witness wanted to watch, his friend wanted to continue on to the party, and so after a few minutes, the friend hit a wall with a stick and shouted, and the image vanished. The similarities between this case and Morris's encounter are fairly striking. You have the witness or witnesses on their way somewhere in the dark. Across a division, whether a roadside or a brook, is a luminous anomaly. Even the setting is similar, a flat space surrounded by small hills. David Morris's sighting of the cone over a wheat field also kind of calls to mind the agricultural ties to many fairy sightings. In David's case, this giant light up cone; in the Isle of Man case, a circle of light. In David's case, framed by the modern belief system of ufology, he believes that the beings come from the lighted object. In the Isle of Man case, the entities are seen moving within the light. In both cases, they are small and are either clothed or covered in red, and are moving quickly and purposefully orderly, you could even say. Each case terminates with a strike of some kind by one of the witnesses, either striking a wall with a stick or striking one of the beings with his car. Again, too, we have this phenomenon which I bring up all the time, so I finally decided to christen it the Flatwoods Raccoon. Many times, when people see something unexpected, unknown, anomalous, paranormal, their first instinct is to try and cram it into their known worldview. In the case of the Flatwoods Monster, the witness's first thought wasn't, hey, it's a 10-foot tall alien robot with light up eyes, but raccoon eyeshine. In this case, Morris's first impulse wasn't, hey, it's a 25-foot tall cone shaped spaceship, but rather, someone's house got struck by lightning. By all accounts, David Morris was a very reliable person, not given to practical jokes or wild stories. His job at the Lamb Electric Company usually ended at either 2 or 4 in the morning, and he typically took that route that he was on that very night. He called it the back way home from work, though he said that he would no longer be taking that road either alone or at night. And this brings up something that I remember Linda Godfrey saying at a presentation. She said that most encounters that she received were from people doing normal things, taking the dog on a walk, driving home from work, etc. And that is what I find so important about anomalous occurrences, is that you have innumerable people throughout all of time just kind of living their regular lives, doing their daily routines, when all of a sudden something comes out of the night, comes out of the fog, it comes out of the unknown. And it disrupts that sense of normality, truly that sense of knowing what the heck is going on. And again, I can't really understate how important I believe that is to just sort of the human condition at large. Well, if you enjoyed this episode on the Monroe Falls roadside humanoids, please like, and if you're new to this field of crop circles, go ahead and subscribe to see what weirdness the future may have in store. Till then, you can keep up with me on my free blog at patreon.com/justanothertinfoilhat, and be sure to check out Somewhere in the Skies, not only for the very best in anomalous listening, but also every other Friday it is the home of the audio versions of Just Another Tinfoil Hat. For today, I am Zelia Edgar, signing off.
Doing.